Okay, and we are continuing on with our little video here for demonstrating this surface rebuild on these gear tooth faces. So now we've got it to where we've got a series of arcs that we did, that we created from Simplify Spline. So that's looking pretty good. And we can now look to see if they, for example, intersect. So I'm going to go to my home ribbon. I'll turn on the visualization of those arc center points. Not super great as far as alignment goes, but that's okay. Just checking that out. And now what we can do, let's go in, wireframe, modify length, and I'm going to do lengthen and extend those arcs. And so it looks like about 200 thousandths on either side. So I'm going to set my length value to 200 thousandths. And we can select each of these curves. And this is nice because they do, in fact, intersect. And because there is an intersection point, we should be able, may have to go in the top view here. Let's go to planes. Let's make sure we're in top. 5 point. Sorry, my eyes are terrible these days. Fact of life, getting old. So I'm just going to resize these a little bit. Okay, there we go. So we'll set top to be the current WCS construction and tool plane. And now we should be able to go into the wireframe ribbon, and I'm going to choose the divide command. So the divide command is going to look at the intersection, and it's actually going to highlight the piece you're going to keep. And so what that allows me to do is just kind of click on the extra piece of these arcs on the opposite side of the intersection where I want to get rid of them. Beautiful. Okay. And so what this has now given us is this series of arcs that we can use to create our surfaces. Before we do that, let's go ahead and create some other splines to help us. So in this case, I'm going to go into the create point position command. And there's a couple ways to do this. I can lock the auto cursor on endpoint, for example, or you can press E on the keyboard, the letter E, and it will now search for an endpoint position. It'll only do the endpoint. So you can't, for example, when it's locked to endpoint, accidentally grab the midpoint. So now I can create one at the end there, and basically on each of these, I'm alternating between hitting the letter E and clicking on the particular point. Okay. I could also lock, for example, into intersection, or you notice I can, without hitting a letter on the keyboard, I can simply position my cursor there, wait till the auto cursor highlights and finds that intersection point, or use the end point of each of those. In fact, let's go ahead and lock this in to intersection. So I chose intersection, I put the lock on, and basically you're just going to go and click on the pair of entities so that it can find the intersection. I'll take that lock off, and we'll go ahead and exit this function. All right, so now I'm ready to create my splines. So I can go create a spline automatic. And I grab the first, next, and last. I'll do the same thing over here, first, next, and last, and hit apply. And then we'll do the same thing down here, first, next, and last. Okay, so this now should give us a collection of curves that we can use to build these two surfaces. So what I'll do here, I'll select the points. Let's move those to a different level. This is going to be called rib splines. So we'll call this rib spline points. Move those point entities to a new level. And I'll save it. Okay, so let's create our net surfaces. We can do this on the same level, but then I'm just going to end up moving it to a different level anyway. So let's go level 16. I call it new surfaces from construction geometry. We're going to make that the main level, and we've only got this other arc level turned on. And so now I'm going to go to surfaces, and we're going to do a net surface. Okay, and then it says select an entity to start a new chain. So what I'm going to do is click on single. Oops, let's unselect that. So I'll choose the first along chain. I'll choose the second along chain. And now what I'm going to do is choose the perpendicular chains, all going in the same direction. So I'll select OK there. That's my net surface. That looks pretty good. I'll do apply. Let's zoom in, make sure we're clicking the two along chains first, and then same thing. All of the across chains, I'm going to click all traversing in the same direction. And we'll do OK, and I'm going to grab all surfaces, and let's make those surfaces green. All right, so I can already see, actually, I'm going to grab all the surfaces. I'm going to right click, I'm going to choose orange, because this really clearly shows the normal of this surface is correct, but the normal of this other surface is incorrect. And I can see that because under my view ribbon, I have backside turned on. I'll turn off translucency. And now if I go to my surfaces ribbon, I can use the option here at the end for change. And I can click on that surface and I can reverse the surface normal. Beautiful. So let's turn off that level with the wireframe, and let's turn on the level with that actual gear surface shape. And what we've got is these two surfaces that now have a sharp intersection instead of that weird funky radius down at the bottom. So let's do change. That looks better. There we go. So I can save that. And now we need to look at, do we need to modify this at all for the surface that we're building? I still don't like that it starts right at that surface edge. So what I'm going to do is go into surfaces, extend, and we're going to try to extend that surface out by 20 thousandths. That looks beautiful. And if we unshade that, you can see there's no weird waviness or no kink in that surface. So I like that. All right, now we know we don't want a machine all the way up here because that's not really where the material is going to lie. That was just the actual shape of the surface. But what we should be able to do, we're looking at this, remember, from the front view, is actually trim these surfaces to a plane. So let's go into the planes. Let's select the front plane as our construction plane. And I'm going to set the Z depth out there. It's like 2.49 something. Let's make it 4.25. And actually, we want to go just a little bit beyond that. So let's do 4.28. And just so that we can visualize it, we're at a Z depth of 4.28. I'm going to set it to 2D. I'm going to look at this in the front view, and I'll go to my wireframe, and I'll just do a rectangle. But on my rectangle, I will select Create Additional Geometry Surface. So if I stretch that rectangle out so that it creates my surface, you can see I got a little bit of a problem. Because this tooth isn't perfectly centered height-wise on the front view, I would either need to rotate it so that it was perfectly centered on the front view, or I would need to decrease my trimming height a little bit so that it could be properly trimmed. So let's select OK and do that. And if I look from the top view, you can see it right here, right? That's going to be the flattest point right there. And what we'd really want is, if I stretch a line, let's make sure we're in 2D. So if I stretch a line between those two teeth endpoints, what's my angle of that line? We got to be in the front view, or top construction plane to see that. And you can see 6.2486 degrees. So what we should really do then is do a line by endpoints. And part of the problem is, where is the middle of this tooth? Well, I'm going to select that gear and do Alt-E. Middle of the tooth is really kind of the midpoint here, because it's curved. It's not precisely flat. So let's do a line by endpoints here. Let's do a line by endpoints here, and then let's go midpoint to midpoint. And so if we're in the top view and we set a Z depth to the midpoint there, and make that 2D. I'm now going to draw a line by endpoints and hit O for the origin, which should be right at that height, and then M for the midpoint. And now, when we look at this in the top view, that should be our angle. So let's analyze that. Looks like we need to rotate it by about minus or either plus or minus 4.3902 degrees. Let's make sure we go with our precision out to 7 places. Still won't do it for the angle. That's okay. So I'm going to copy that value. Let's go into levels. Let's turn everything on. And turn off the subplate and the fixture. Let's turn off the stock. Let's grab the finder and find that solid. Let's turn that guy off. Okay, that looks like pretty much everything that can and should rotate. So I'll select that. We'll look at this from the top view. We're going to do a rotation. So I'm not rotating the stock. I'm not rotating the part. I'm not rotating the fixture or anything like that. Just the geometry that needs to move. And that's going to be that number minus 270. And that's going in the opposite direction. So we're going to set it back. And we're going to tell it to move. So that should put essentially the center of that gear tooth centered on the front. Okay. So let's get back to our new surfaces. All right. Oh, looks like somehow those surfaces didn't get properly rotated. Okay, that's okay. Let's look from the top view. Let's give them a rotation. Rotate it. Okay. Let's save that. Let's regenerate. Regenerate the display list. And let's go through the levels. Okay, so this gets us back to where we were at before, but you'll notice we rotated everything into the front plane, and now we have this nice even break. This is a little bit high. We did, I think, 4.28, and so you can see we're about 30 thou above where that edge of that tooth is, but this is good. We want nice clean geometry. So what I can do now is surfaces, uh, trimmed surfaces. So select the first set. That's my first set of surfaces, and select the second set. That's my second set. Indicate the portion you want to keep. Oh, and I got to do that on both sides. And what we want to do here, I like split model. Split model is just going to separate everything and not get rid of anything. So really, we only want to do the first set anyway, and I'll say OK. And what that now allows me to do, I can delete all those extra pieces. And now what I've got is essentially a beautiful set of surfaces. Surfaces that extend beyond the edge of the surface where I really need to clean up on all directions, and I'm looking pretty good there. Now, what I should do after I do that trimming, so this is new surfaces, let's do 15, and we'll do new surf top boundary, and I'll do wireframe. Let's do it in blue, and then curve on one edge. Ooh. Curve on one edge, that's looking good there. We'll select OK. And we can try fillet. And let's turn off trim. Let's go radius 125. Oh, I'm in the wrong view. Okay, so planes, we want to be in the front. Let's save it. And we are set to 3D. Let's set the Z depth anyway. Should be 4.28. That's great. So fillet entities, radius 125. It's not doing it because it won't automatically extend. So because it's a spline, so what we should do is modify length. Okay, so now that they actually extend, we should be able to put a fillet on. And so what am I looking for here? I'm looking to make sure that the fillet that I'm using is bigger than the radius of the tool that I'm going to drive in there. So, this should technically allow me to drive a 250 thousandths end mill. But let's edit this. I'm going to make it 150. Let's look at this from the front view. Yeah, we're getting there, and I'd love to have a nice little smooth transition from side to side. I mean, if I do 180, it's probably a little too big. You see, I'm not able to get out to that edge of that surface. And the question is, do I allow my tool enough room to move here on the edge? The answer is no. So I like that 150. Let's go back to 150. That's probably pretty good. It may be just a little too large. right here. So I could do like 140. I just want to make sure I have enough room to cleanly come off the surface before I transition back to the other side. I'm going to call it 145, and I'll do the same thing over here. You'll notice I do not have trim turned on. Um, Now I can use this divide tool. Divide will also delete, by the way, so I can just get rid of these extra little pieces. And now I've got a nice boundary that's up above my surface that should allow my tool to reach the entire area of those surfaces. So let's save that. I'm also going to go back to my levels and go back to this new surface level. I don't need this wireframe anymore, so I can actually delete that wireframe. Definitely don't want to delete those surfaces. Put all that work into making them. So I'll delete those out. And if I turn 15 back on, that's where my new boundary is. That's looking good. So the other thing that I need here is I've got this nice sharp transition. I could simply machine these surfaces and let the tool kind of roll in between each surface, and the resulting fillet that I would get here would be just the radius of the end mill. But I like to have a nice smooth transition where possible. So what I'll do is I'll go into surfaces. Let's do fillet to surfaces. I'm going to make sure trim surfaces is disabled. So first set, end selection, second set, end selection, and make sure trim is turned off. And now I'm going to use an 093 end mill. That's the size I believe uh, that Mirek had been using. 53, which is a 0.04675 radius or something like that. So I'm going to make the fillet just a little bit bigger than the actual radius of the tool that I'm going to use inside there. And so if I was going to rough that out, for example, with a 125 end mill, that radius, 063 or 0625 for the actual size tool, well, I might give it a 0.07 radius. So I'll generate that first, 0.07, and or apply. Then I'll do the same thing. First set, second set, let's set my radius to 0.053. Boom, apply. First set, second set, and now maybe I'm going to totally finish this thing off with, I don't know, a 1/16th ball end mill, 0.0625. So let's make this 035, which will be just slightly bigger than my final finish tool. And so here you can see, because I'm not trimming, I can just select the two walls and whichever fillet radius is appropriate. So let's say OK, and let's do one more just for fun. And let's make that 0.01. Okay, there's what it would look like with a true 10th thou fillet running down the spine. And we can even now, take these surfaces. I think that one's the 035. And we can turn on the original gear here. And you can see we're getting nice stippling. So this surfaces, this rebuild job we did looks good. Some slight areas where there's a little variance. This isn't going to matter, I promise, especially out at the very edge here. But you can see where, at the very edge, there was this warping because on the original gear, this fillet here would have been at least 050. You can see here this, I think, 053 is close. This 035 is definitely under. So you can really just kind of get a good idea of what does the geometry we've built look like compared to the original geometry. So, I think this kind of 35 thou radius is pretty good. I mean, we could go in there with something slightly smaller. It's going to dive in a little bit more in the corner, which is probably really what they want. I mean, honestly, having this bigger radius at the very edge, I think, to me, it reeks of a modeling inaccuracy. So, I mean, I could always be wrong, and you could verify that with the design engineer, but this is going to give us that really nice, clean result and allow us to choose between different options when we toolpath it. So if I go back here and get this boundary, we should be ready to go. Let me save that. All right, so let's do one more section that's based on putting the toolpaths down.